Greetings adult collectors, I am Crash the Customizer. Welcome to another custom Transformers showcase. This is my custom Transformers Prime Soundwave. Now this is a heavily modified and repainted Transformers Prime Beast Hunters Soundwave, because to buy the original Transformers Prime Soundwave figure can cost around $70, and I don't really want to spend $70 on something that probably would have retailed around $15 and like nowadays is around like $20. So I was able to get this figure for about $26 to $28 because the Beast Hunters version of Soundwave had a lot of weird spikes and inaccurate colors, as did a lot of the Beast Hunters line, because Beast Hunters kind of went their own direction when it came with the actual figures and had really nothing to do with the actual show. So they're not really in high demand, which makes them a little bit easier to get your hands on. So this is honestly the easiest way to get Soundwave. But to actually make it look show accurate, I had to do a lot of modifying and painting to actually make it look like how Soundwave looked on the show. So starting off, I had to basically break off a lot of spikes that were sticking off on his arm. I had to break off some spikes on his legs, this little spike back here. And then I also had to break off these little spikes on the shoulders. And then I just had to kind of course, give him his accurate paint. So what I ended up doing with this is, to get around his Decepticon symbol, I actually took a toothpick and painted around it so that I wouldn't get any paint actually over it. I wanted to actually keep the original symbol on here because actually this will show accurate. So the paint I actually used was that dark bluish gray I used for my Starscream. It's actually about the right color. And then of course I painted in some black details and little tiny purple details. And then I of course gave him his posable fingers here, so you can actually have him like pointing like he did in one of the episodes. Of course have him actually have like a closed fist. I didn't give him a thumb because he kind of already has this little thing that sticks off, and it's much easier to not try to give him a thumb because like it'd be easier to actually make the transformation work without giving him the thumb. So with this figure, instead of coming with Laserbeak, it came with Ravage, which again had nothing to do with Transformers Prime because Ravage was never in Transformers Prime. It was just Laserbeak throughout the whole show. So I had to try to modify it to actually look like Laserbeak. So what I ended up doing is remove it from Soundwave's chest. I basically just kind of took the spikes that were on Soundwave's shoulders and glued them right here, and then I just of course painted it with the same color as Soundwave, and then I tried to of course give him the little camera focus here, give him the little like weird eyes that he had, and it kind of looks like Laserbeak. I'm supposed to be able to take this and like rotate it around, but this doesn't actually move because it was supposed to be Ravage. So I had to try to do with what I could, and this looks about as decent as I can get it from what I was given with this figure. But I mean, it honestly kind of looks like Laserbeak, because Laserbeak really didn't look like much of anything in the show. He was supposed to be, I think, like a Manta Ray or something, even though he's technically supposed to be a bird. I don't understand what they're really going for the Laserbeak design, but I mean, it's just how Laserbeak looked in the show. So this is about as close as I could get. And of course he just pops in Soundwave the same way as he should. And you can see, kind of looking at the inside of Soundwave's chest, there's a lot of details I had to try to paint in. So I started off with just kind of painting it all black, and then I actually took my X-Acto knife and just actually painted in all the little purple details, which was really hard to do, to get all those little details painted in, but I was actually able to do it. And I mean, honestly, this figure is probably one of like the most like elaborate paint jobs I've ever had to do, just because of how I had to paint all those little details and try to actually make it look like how he actually looked in the show, and all like the cutting off all the spikes and stuff. And honestly, if you were to look at this figure, you would never know that this was the Beast Hunters Soundwave, because it literally looks just like he looked actually in the show. It looks like actually the original figure that came out before the Beast Hunters figure ever did come out. So now we'll go ahead and put Laserbeak back in Soundwave's chest, and to do that you have this little peg that goes in this little port. And then you stick these spikes into little sections of his chest here, just line it up like that, and then just peg it right in. And I did have to cut a little bit of this section off here because since this was a Ravage, I had to cut off just a little bit there so you actually see details you're supposed to be able to see. So now we'll go ahead and bring some comparisons with Soundwave here. Here we have Soundwave with his animated self. Here he is a Starscream, and of course the Soundwave figure is a little bit too short. Obviously he should be about like here, but there's really nothing you can do about that because this was a deluxe and this is a Voyager, and even the original figure was still a deluxe, and that's just because that's the way Hasbro made him. Because like though scale would obviously be something you'd want to have, it doesn't really bother me too much because one, it's just something that I don't really like worry about too much because it's just not that big of a deal, and then two is the fact that a point that Imgo pointed out once is that Hasbro doesn't care about scale, so why should we? Because as much as we might want all figures to be in scale, unfortunately Hasbro never seems to actually give us that, so there's really nothing we can do about it. And there is one thing you can kind of do about this, is you can make him a little bit taller by kind of like rearranging his legs a little bit here. It doesn't add much high as he needs to have, but it kind of works. So what we're going to do here is take these little sections here and bring them up, and then bring this down like this, and then bring this up, and then kind of bring his feet back a little bit. And it does add a little bit of height to him, just a little bit. So I'm going to bring this section here back down so it kind of gives him his heels. And obviously it doesn't make him as tall as he needs to be, but it kind of sort of works. But obviously he needs something to kind of hold him in place, and this isn't really a very flat surface. I mean, even on this it's not perfect. So obviously he's not really able to stand very well. So if you like lean against that, you can kind of get him to stand. And this is honestly how I do display him on my shelf. It's kind of on that little, that's where he's on his tiptoes basically to get him to stand. But just as is, I mean, it's just a little shorter than it's probably supposed to be, but to say there's really nothing that can be done about it. It just kind of is what it is. But other than that, there we have Soundwave with Starscream. And here we have Soundwave with all the Autobots. So now we'll go ahead and get Soundwave into his vehicle mode. The first thing we need to do is remove Laserbeak, because you can't actually have him transform in this mode. So next thing we need to do is you got to line up his arms here. I need to raise the camera just a tad. So you got to line up his arms, or a little peg hole here and this peg right here. You just got to try to fold his arms up, and it's on a hinge and a ball joint. Just kind of line that up, peg that together so his arm is just straight down. Do the same on this side, just kind of fold it back and just peg it in. So then what we need to do is we need to pull back on his back here, and it'll allow us to flip out this little thruster, and then go ahead and bring Soundwave's head down. It's on a little spring, I guess for an automorph gimmick, but I don't really see a point for it necessarily. So just bring his head in, and then you bring the section back up, and then you got this weird look. It almost looks like Soundwave has this weird cone head. Anyway, so then go to flip him upside down here, and what we're going to do is we need to work on his legs. So to do that, we need to basically fold his feet up, fold this heel section down, fold the other foot down, fold the heel, and then we bring this section down, and then you have all these tabs. You try to tab together in his legs here. So you got to get all those lined up, tab them all in, and then you peg this little section together, and then peg together this section, and then once this is all pegged together, which is kind of hard to do because it's like rubber material, once you get it all pegged together like it's supposed to be here, it'll peg in this little section right here, so this stays together, so it won't come apart. Again, it's really hard to get it to actually peg together because it's like a rubber instead of plastic. So then, just anything that comes on tabs, re-tab it back together. The next thing we need to do is take his arms. We're just going to rotate them around here, and then they will come down on hinges. You got to separate the hinges here from the, or pull the hinges down from his chest. Do the same on this side. Just pull it down, and then that will allow us to be able to take his arms and bring them to right here with those little pegs in his legs here. Just got to line everything up, and this likes to pop off. Just pop his arm back on here. Go. Just line that peg up, or this little clip. Let's clip right in, line it up. So then we need to come down to the bottom, and we this section of his arms down, and we'll flip in his hands and just kind of bring it down like that. Then do the same on this side. And this is kind of why I wasn't really able to give him any like posable thumbs, because it'd be really hard to actually make posable thumbs to actually be able to transform. So I just gave him posable fingers, but not thumbs. Honestly, I think it kind of works. So then we pretty much have Soundwave in his weird looking plane mode, which I honestly thought this was not an actual plane, because Soundwave's design always did look very odd, and Soundwave's character definitely seems like one that wouldn't actually scan a Earth plane. But this is actually based on an actual plane. It's some kind of like, it's like a bomber plane that I've honestly never seen until I looked it up, and it's like, okay, I guess it's a real plane. So, as far as Laserbeak goes, there's really not a good way to actually put him on here, because I believe with the original Soundwave figure, Laserbeak just kind of sat on here, like this. But of course with this figure, they didn't actually have the peg, so you can kind of just sit him there. And I don't know, it almost seems like he should have pegged right here, because there's this little like place on his torso section here. You can kind of almost do this, which I guess kind of works, sort of, but it looks a little odd. I don't think that really works, so I just kind of just sit him right here. He doesn't actually peg in, he just kind of just sits there and just kind of halfway works, and that's actually how he attached in the actual show. So that's just really what I tend to do, but I don't know. So let's go ahead and take him off. He's just going to fall off anyway, and of course you can't actually peg him in on the chest, because there's like nothing really there. I mean, I guess you could. I mean, let's see here. I mean, I guess you can still do that. Never actually tried. Let's see. I mean, I guess you can do that. Guess that works. One thing I will say about this is a lot of the tabs don't really seem like they want to stay together all that well, especially when it comes to his arms. They just tend to want to like really come out. So I don't really know if that's something I'm doing, or if it's just the case of the actual figure just has very weak tabs. I don't know. But, so here we have Soundwave in his weird looking plane mode. So now I'll go ahead and bring in some comparisons. So here is Soundwave with his animated self. And here he is with Starscream. Now to get Soundwave back into his robot mode, first thing we need to do is untab these, which is actually really way easier than it should be. I'll go ahead and take Laserbeak out. It'll be much easier to be able to see what we're doing here. So we're going to take his arms and just fold them back up on those hinges, just like that. And we'll go ahead and untab his legs here, and then try to spread like that, and then we'll take this section here and we'll fold up like this, and then fold back his heel, fold down his foot, this will landing gear, flip it up like that right there. Then this side, fold up the heel, fold down the foot. Now I got Soundwave standing and looking very weird looking. So now what we need to do is we need to untab his arms here, and we'll just basically kind of just peg in this little section here, and again it's that rubber, so it's really hard to get it to move. Let's go ahead and do this one, see if I can get this one to work. There we go. Let's get this one. Let's stick a finger under there and try to get that to come up. There we go. Just flip them up. So now what we need to do is we need to take his arms and just kind of unpeg them. So they come just like that. And we just basically hinge them back a little bit on these little hinges here. And then fold down these hinges and just kind of rotate them around. Just fold it down, rotate it around. And now to take away this weird looking cone head, give him some of his actual head, just go ahead and flip this up. And just popped off, okay. That's new. Anyway, so pull that back, and I guess it does kind of give him an automorph gimmick with the spring. You can see how I pulled that back. It does flip its head up, but I honestly don't see the point of the spring really. But anyway, so flip this section in, and then this will all peg back into its back here. Bring his head up a little more. What I don't really like the spring is it doesn't really work like I'd like it to, because it kind of brings his head down way too much, and then you gotta try to get it to, there we go, get his head where it actually should be. So then the last thing to do is to take Laserbeak and put him back in his chest. Just kind of line that up. And then peg Laserbeak back into Soundwave's chest. And there we have Soundwave back into his robot mode. And I'm honestly really happy with how this one turned out, because this was probably one of the figures I probably put the most work in when it comes to my Transformers Prime Customs. Good, because given that I was working with the Beast Hunters figure, which really looked nothing like the show, this was honestly probably one of the most challenging Prime Customs I've done, because just all the painting and all the things I had to break off and try to figure out how to make it look like he actually looked in the show. It really did take a lot of work to actually get it to look like this, and to have all of the Transformers Prime main characters of both the Autobots and Decepticons is like really something I've always wanted to kind of be able to have, just to be able to display. Of course, like I've mentioned it before, I got to Transformers Prime a little bit late, so trying to get my hands on the figures now tends to be a lot harder, just because of how expensive things tend to actually get when it comes to like older figures. But to actually have this Soundwave just makes me so happy to actually finally own a Transformers Prime Soundwave. And that's really pretty much it for this video. So if you like this, be sure to check out the description, where you'll find a link that will take you to all of my Transformers Prime and animated customs. There will also be a link that will take you to my stop motion channel, where it's currently just a lot of random stop motions, but we'll at some point hopefully have a stop motion series. Be sure to check that out. Be sure to like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any future customs. Until next time, this is Crash the Customizer out.
Soundwave. Now that I am in charge, I want you to handle all mining operations. If that's not too much for you to handle, Soundwave.